Well, I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with David Parks. This is Carol Kelso here. I'm in Medjugorje in a wonderful place of pilgrimage, and I met this wonderful man about 12 years ago on my first trip to Medjugorje, and he had a huge impact on my life. And it's wonderful to have you here, David. It's wonderful to talk to you. Perhaps you can share with the listener a bit about your own background and what brought you to Medjugorje many years ago.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. If ever there was a situation where God decided he wanted to use a person, I'm probably a good place to start. I had no interest in Medjugorje. I came as a reluctant pilgrim, and that all came about because I had an illness called Crohn's disease, which I got when I was 27. And when I got it, I was playing soccer professionally in Ireland, and I had the great pleasure of representing my country. But I played against Pelé, George Best, Bobby Charlton, and life was wonderful. This illness came along, plagued my life for 14 years, 10 major surgeries. And the last surgery, the doctors gave me weeks to live. And it was rather difficult because my eldest boy was born with an incurable illness called cystic fibrosis. My wife Anne had never worked before since Ken was born, so I was the only breadwinner, and I was a professional musician at that time. So if I was going to die, it meant nobody would take care of Anne and the kids. But I was very fortunate. I had the band in the Burlington Hotel in Dublin. They ran a benefit concert night to help with our medical expenses. 2 people there who ran a travel agency, and an invitation was issued to myself and my wife Anne. God had not been part of my life. 8 years, extremely angry. The illness to Ken, I couldn't cope with it. Why me, Lord? All the usual things that you feel sorry for yourself. And the only reason I accepted the invitation to come to Medjugorje was Anne and I spent our honeymoon in a place called Savtat, which is quite close to the airport in Dubrovnik. We fell in love with the country and the people. And after half an hour of the man asking us to come and me saying, no, God isn't part of my life, he made a statement that went like this: look, David, on the way home from Medjugorje, we'll stop at a little place you've never heard of before called Savtat, and we'll have dinner and we'll have mass. And I looked at him and I said, well, look, we'll have none of the mass stuff, but dinner in Savtat was too great to refuse. So that's the reason I came. I came kicking and screaming with a wonderful priest from Chicago who spent an awful lot of time in Ireland, but toured in Scotland. His name was Father Peter Mary Rookie. Great man, wonderful man with a great intercessory powers of healing. And in the graveyard, of all places, because the doctors had told me I had 2 weeks to live when I came to Medjugorje. So I knew I'd 1 foot in the grave, didn't realize the Lord was going to take me to the graveyard to make me whole again. So I had an instant physical healing. But the real miracle of Medjugorje took place 2 days later, up in the Hill of Apparitions, where my whole life was transformed. And it was there that I made peace with Jesus. I made peace with Anne because I hadn't been a good dad or a good husband. And in actual fact, I left Anne twice. But Anne has an incredible ability to forgive, and she forgave me on both occasions and invited me back to the family home. And thank God we're still together. 43 years married, still holding hands. If we ever let go, we'll kill one another.
Well, you know what they say, behind every great man there's an even better woman. So, how long are you here now, David? How many years are you here?
I'm working here since 2001, but I came in 1989 was the first time where I had my healing here in Medjugorje.
And do you think it's been an invitation for you to come here and to share your testimony with pilgrims? Tell us a bit about that and what you have seen. Have you seen many miracles happen here outside of yourself?
Yeah, it's been a great honor, first of all, and a great privilege to be working here in Medjugorje. I love to sing. Singing is what my life has all been about before I came to Medjugorje. And if there was one thing that I could say I miss, it's that I don't sing every night in Medjugorje. We do 1 concert for all English-speaking people. But since I've come here, the only reason I came was my son was born with cystic fibrosis and was extremely ill. And I was touring America. And in 2001, the man who invited me to come here persuaded me, and I came. And partly was that it was easier to get home from Europe than it was from America when Ken was sick. So in all the years that I've been here, I've seen many miracles. I've seen people get out of wheelchairs. I've seen the blind see, the mute speak. But having said that, they're not the miracles of Medjugorje. The greatest miracles of Medjugorje are the spiritual ones. And that's why I say to people, of the two that I had, the second one, as I said, was the one on the apparition hill where I made peace with myself, the Lord, and Anne. And that was the greatest miracle. And they, for whatever we'll say, for every one physical one, there'll be thousands of spiritual ones that nobody speaks about. Nobody.
I heard somebody say here that a life without God is no real life at all. You're really a true testament to that, David.
Yeah.
Your life before you came to the Lord, I guess you had everything. You said you were a professional footballer, you had notoriety. But looking back at your life now and then, it must be it was a huge transformation for you.
The 8 years that I was away from the church, non-reflection, were the 8 loneliest years. Really and truly. If God is not centre in your life, there's really no purpose. We function. But there's no reality. There's no inner strength for you that's there that you can cope on the tough times. So I was just so blessed. The Lord knew what he was doing to bring me here. And then he knew that I had a voice. He gave me the gift, and it's only at that time that I realized it is a gift. And so I came here, and it's just been the greatest blessing you could ever have.
You know, there'll be many skeptics out there, David, who will say, it's just a group of Christians getting together. You're all going to get that lovely fuzzy feeling between you all. But what would you say to that?
Listen, you come to Medjugorje, it's like your car, that your battery is low. And when our spiritual, it's particularly nowadays, because God has been taken out of everything. I mean, really and truly. And as I said, if you don't have God in your life, and I know that myself, but to try and tell somebody, people said, it's only hysteria. I said that when I came, it was hysteria. But now I realize that God and our Blessed Mother does appear. It doesn't matter what anybody will tell me. I was the skeptic coming out, but nothing. It doesn't matter what stories you hear about this, that, or the other, the wealth. Listen, they're human beings at the end of the day. They have their own human frailties, but they've been given a great gift that they see Our Lady. And the more people throw negative at me about Medjugorje, the more I realize that it is true. Definitely true.
So for you, what is the true message? What is the message of Medjugorje?
The message of Medjugorje is that God loves you, that he works miracles, and that if we'd only let him be part of our life would be blissful. I was away from 8 years, and I thought I was the furthest I could ever be away from God. But now I realize that he was standing beside me because he loves me so much.
You spoke the other night about your son and the power of prayer. Tell us a bit about that.
Have you all day?
Yeah.
Ken was born with cystic fibrosis 1975, struggled through his early years, had a double lung transplant in 2001, magnificent for 13 and a half years, and then the anti-rejection drug attacked his kidneys, so he was facing kidney failure. But on the 15th of January this year, he got pneumonia. He went into hospital the day later, and then I flew out to America because I always do a concert tour in January. And I was doing a conference in a place called Paso Robles, midway between Los Angeles and San Francisco. And I made arrangements that Anne would call me at midnight Californian time, which is 8 a.m. on Irish time. And at 11 o'clock the phone rang, and it was Anne, and she was in floods of tears. The doctors had called. The family were to get together. There was no hope for Ken. So I cancelled the rest of the tour, booked a ticket, flew home, got home on the Monday, and Ken was on life support when I arrived. And the doctors kept saying, look, it's not good. But he pulled through. For whatever reason, he just pulled through, and he was about 6 days in high dependency, and then he took a turn for the worst again. So we were all called again, and we were told that the markers were not good, that he was on the highest dose of antibiotics that he could have, and he was on the only antibiotics that he could have. And they said if they don't come down. But the same thing, 5 days go by and they say no change, no change. We go in the next day and they're talking about moving him out. into high dependency unit. So he pulled through. The doctors sort of scratching their heads. He comes home on dialysis. He'd been on dialysis while he was in hospital. And his first session of dialysis after he came home, I went with him because I had to put him in a wheelchair. He had no strength. And he went and had his dialysis, and then he went upstairs to the heart and lung transplant for a meeting, an appointment. And when I wheeled him in, normally they wouldn't allow us. It would be Ken is 41, 42 this year. So people think when I talk about Ken, he's a child, but he is my child. It doesn't matter what age he is. And when he'd go in, they always dealt with Ken. We were the drivers. So I wheeled him in and I said, okay, I'll go out. And he said, oh no, stay. So you sit down there. And then he made a phone call and 2 other doctors came in who had been treating Ken. And they looked at him and said, listen, Ken, we never ever thought we'd see you in an outpatient's clinic again. He said, people come out of ICU maybe once, but people don't come out of ICU a second time. So they said, it's nothing that we did. It's all down to prayer. So that was great. He was absolutely thrilled, and he put on a little bit of weight. It was difficult for him at home. And then just before I came out, I was late coming to Medjugorje because of the crisis at home. But the week before, I'm here now, 3.5 weeks. But just before I left, he went in for dialysis. And midway through dialysis, they do blood tests. And they said to Ken, my God, Ken, your bloods are fantastic. He said, we won't do the rest of the session. So they said, come in on Friday and we'll do the blood test first and then we'll have a look. So they went in on the Friday, did the blood test and said, Ken, we're not doing the dialysis. So this went on for the last 2 weeks. And then on Monday last, they said to Ken, look, come in on Wednesday. We'll do the blood tests and we'll see what happens. Came in on Wednesday. Bloods were fantastic. And they said, okay, Ken, tomorrow we'll do a 24-hour urine collection. We'll give you the bottles, take it home, bring them in on Friday, and we'll see. So he rang me last night. So this is the 17th of May, my wife Anne's birthday. So he rang me last night to say, Dad, the hospital we're on, the bloods are fantastic. On Wednesday, they're taking out the line. I don't need dialysis. So that is the power of prayer. And the reason I say that to you is the second time that Ken in the hospital, when he got the second bout of the pneumonia, was put back on life support, my youngest son, the worrier of our family, who was into all the high tech, Facebook and all that. Now I have a Facebook account by default. I don't like social media. But anyway, when Ken was going for the second, he said, Dad, I'm going on to Facebook. And I said, oh, Gary, please don't bother. No, I'm going on. I'm going to ask people for prayer. So when he linked his account, Ken's account, my daughter's account, my account, and Anne's account. And I'd say within 10 minutes of putting it up for prayer, there was about 2,500 hits for people all over the world who are praying for Ken. That is the power of prayer. And don't forget that.
Well, that's wonderful. And what would you say to people out there who believe that God doesn't exist? That, we're believing in a fairy tale? Because as you say, it's getting harder out there. What would you say to the skeptics or people who are maybe sitting on the side of the fence, who aren't willing to consider God?
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
Well, first of all, the world is so materialistic now. I mean, everything that you see, television, God isn't part of it. Workplace, God isn't part. Schools, God isn't part of it. But God is the one in times of trouble, that it doesn't matter how skeptical you are. If you are faced with a life-threatening illness, the first thing you do is you ask God to help you. And God does exist. And we know at the end, we've been told it, that the Lord will triumph at the end of the day. Once you lose sight of God, if there's no respect for the babies in the womb, I remember a priest saying that to me many, many years ago when the abortion issues were happening all over the place. And he said, the womb used to be the safest place on earth, and now it is the most dangerous. And that's true. And once we've lost sight of life, what is life worth? That's all you have to ask yourself nowadays. What's life worth? And the only one who seems to worry about it is God.
Well, David, it's just been an absolute pleasure coming here and listening to you. Not just your music, but listening to your testimony. And thank you for all that you do, for sticking your neck out for God, and I pray that you'll continue to honour. And I take your Crohn's is still at bay. There's no return of it.
No problem. Yeah. I get doctors here all the time coming up and say to you, "Oh, I'm a doctor. Tell me more about it." So I mean, the Lord works miracles.
Well, listen, thank you, and I look forward to seeing you back here. Please God, in another 10 years' time, we'll keep on going. And thanks again.
Pleasure
Okay.
is all mine.